What would you do if your innocent children were publicly humiliated thousands of feet in the air just because of the color of their skin? This isn't just a story, it's a wake-up call. What happened to these twins will shock you, anger you, and maybe even restore your faith in justice, but only if you stay until the end. And hey, if you believe in truth, fairness, and standing up against injustice, hit that subscribe button right now, because we tell the stories they don't want you to hear. It was supposed to be the twins' first big trip in style, a surprise their father had been planning for months. First class, top seats, an experience they would never forget. The twins, Daniel and Danielle, were dressed in matching navy blue, blazers, polished shoes, and smiles wide enough to brighten any cabin. Their father, a busy but loving man, had meetings to attend in another city and promised to join them later that evening. For now, their aunt would escort them to their destination. As they approached the gate, other passengers glanced and whispered, noticing their perfectly tailored outfits and their bright, excited faces. But the moment the boarding agent scanned their tickets, her polite mask shifted. She glanced down at the boarding pass, then back at the twins, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. Oh, first class? There must be a mistake. She waved over a member of the flight crew who quickly began flipping through a manifest. The twins' aunt explained that their father had booked these tickets himself and confirmed everything twice. The crew member smiled, but it was the type of smile that froze the room. She leaned in and said, "I think these seats are for other passengers. Let's have you in economy where you'll be more comfortable." The words hit like a slap. More comfortable wasn't about comfort. It was about putting them where she thought they belonged. Passengers around them began to watch, sensing tension. One man in a suit raised his eyebrows. Another woman shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The twins, confused but still polite, clutched their small carry-ons. Their aunt protested, but the crew member's tone grew sharper, cloaked in policy talk that was little more than an excuse. They were ushered toward the back of the plane. The sparkle in their eyes dimmed, but this was only the beginning, because someone else on that flight had recognized them. The twins sat quietly in economy, the sound of overhead bins slamming, drowning out their small voices. The aunt's frustration burned in her chest, but she knew the crew's tone, the "we can do what we want" tone, backed by authority at 30,000 feet. She tried calling the father, but his phone went straight to voicemail. He was still in a high-stakes meeting. As the plane taxied, a middle-aged man in business attire walked past them, heading toward the bathroom. He glanced at their faces and froze. His eyes widened in recognition. He was a journalist, one who specialized in corporate scandals and discrimination cases. He had seen those twins before, in a news segment about their father, an influential CEO known for his generosity and his outspoken fight against inequality. He didn't say anything yet, but he quietly slipped back into his first-class seat, observing the crew's behavior. Up front, the two first-class seats assigned to the twins remained conspicuously empty. The crew avoided mentioning it, chatting casually with other passengers and serving champagne. One flight attendant, younger and nervous-looking, kept glancing toward the back where the twins sat. The journalist began typing notes on his laptop. If this was what he thought it was, it could be a career-defining exposé. The flight lifted into the clouds, but the atmosphere was tense. The aunt leaned toward the twins and whispered, "Don't worry, sweethearts. This isn't over." She didn't know yet just how right she was, but because at that very moment, their father had just stepped out of his meeting, noticed the missed calls, and felt the first pulse of anger rise in his chest. The flight landed without incident, but the twins' father had already booked himself onto the next available plane, in first class, on the same airline. He wasn't the kind of man to let injustice slide quietly. He was greeted at the gate of the arrival city by his shaken children and their furious aunt. The journalist who had been on their flight was also there, waiting, ready to introduce himself. He explained everything he had witnessed: the refusal to honor the tickets, the empty first-class seats, the subtle but unmistakable prejudice. The father's face hardened, but his voice remained calm, controlled, the way powerful men sound, before they make a storm happen. He thanked the journalist, took his children's hands, and walked directly to the airline's VIP desk. What followed was not a scene. It was a dismantling. He asked for the supervisor, then the regional manager, then the corporate liaison. At each step, he pulled out his phone, showing proof of the tickets, the timestamps, the receipts. But then he added something else: the fact that he was one of the airline's largest private investors. The blood drained from the staff's faces. The journalist began quietly recording. In less than 20 minutes, the entire management team was summoned to a conference room. Passengers began filming as word spread. The crew members involved were called in. The father didn't raise his voice, but every word hit like a hammer. "You thought you could humiliate my children in public," he said, "and hide behind your so-called policy. But your policy isn't the problem. The people enforcing it are." By the next morning, the story was everywhere, and not just because of the journalist. The father's legal team filed a formal discrimination complaint with supporting witness, statements, photographs, and video. Social media lit up with hashtags demanding accountability. The airline issued a public apology, suspended the crew involved, and launched an internal investigation, but the damage was done. Bookings plummeted. Shareholders panicked. Behind the scenes, the father made calls, not to hurt the airline, but to force systemic change. A new training program was rolled out, and several executives quietly resigned. Months later, the twins were invited to speak at a youth conference about standing up for yourself and for others. They stood on stage, confident and smiling, no longer the confused children from that flight. The journalist's article went viral, winning awards and sparking global conversations about bias in the most unexpected places. The father watched, from the front row, pride in his eyes. And while the airline tried to recover its image, the twins' story lived on, not just as a moment of injustice, but as proof that when the right person stands up, entire systems can be forced to their knees.